Here we are. Hello, everybody. We're doing another live stream. Hopefully, things will go better technical wise tonight than it did last night. We had a few technical difficulties, but we got past them. I also have a list of topics in case we run out of things to talk about. That way, there's no dead silence of things that we can talk about. Again, I'm Chris. Most of you probably know that, and this is Andrew from Naples Drone Solution. If you're in the Southwest Florida area and you need someone to do drone work of almost any type, that's the guy right there. Okay. So first off, we have to mention that today's 420.
Oh boy.
Do you know what that means? It actually means a few different things.
Means that yesterday was 419.
Yes. Well, 420 is an interesting date. It's the whole, obviously the get high thing that people talk about. When I was in high school, that was our senior skip day, which oddly enough, my senior skip day, we had two senior skip days for some reason. And one of them, I think it was this one, me and my friends decided we're going to be smart and not skip on senior skip day because all the teachers know you're going to be skipping and they give the pop quizzes. So we ended up skipping another day and we still got in trouble. But it ended up also being, supposedly, I don't know if this is true, it's Hitler's birthday. And it was the date that senior skip day was the day of the Columbine shooting. So, I mean, that was the day. I don't know if it was really Hitler's birthday,
It really
but
is.
yeah, but it is the day of the Columbine shooting my senior year of high school. So anyway,
Weird.
yeah. So a few things. 420. I just saw that as we were getting ready to start this video. I was like, oh, it's 420. Okay. So yesterday we talked about a bunch of stuff. One of the things, I have an image here, which I texted to you earlier. We talked about Glenn Danzig, the musician, and how short he is, and I talked about a meme I saw.
Is he really 3 feet 2 inches tall? How tall is he? 5'3". Yeah.
So anyway, we also talked yesterday about playing some retro games together eventually, and we both mentioned GoldenEye. You even held up the cartridge, and I was hoping that we could play online because some emulators, I've never done it, but I know some game emulators allow network play. But I didn't see one. I saw one talking about there was one once that allowed N64 network play, but it's kind of a dead project now, I think. I know the ones I normally use don't seem to have the functionality, but I was looking for it today. Also, people who are watching this, yesterday I noticed after we finished live stream that Andrew was a lot louder than me. Let us know if there's any volume issues, and I'll try to adjust those. So anyway, going back to GoldenEye, I was trying to see if there's any type of GoldenEye, like there was a Doom mod that someone was working on that I don't think ever got finished that turned Doom kind of into GoldenEye thing. But there actually was a project, or it might still be active. I don't think it's too active. It's about 10 years old now, called GoldenEye Source. Which when I saw, I was like, oh, is this an open source, creation of GoldenEye? It's not, but it is. It's a fan based, and I have some notes on it here. So it's an unofficial 007 remake with modern graphics, and it's using the Source engine, which is why it's called Source, which is developed by Valve. You would think it's called Source. It sounds like it's supposed to be open source, but it's not. Source, I guess. I was looking to see if it ran on Linux. It says on their official website for the GoldenEye Source, Unfortunately, Source SDK, the base of 2007, which is what the game is based on, does not support any operating system other than Windows. They had plans on porting it to a newer version of Source, 2013, which supports Linux and Mac OS, but it was just too much work. Which is just one of those things. It's like, unfortunately, I don't get when you make an unofficial fan based game and you're not going to share the source code is just weird.
Well, it
Um,
just sounds like something that'd be perfect for what you were talking about yesterday. I mean, that's the point of open source, isn't it? You release the source code, you'd have it on Linux and
yeah,
Mac by
but
now.
even if this game was open source, people would have the foundation under it. The game engine is not open
No.
source. And I'm sure if these people release source code of the game, someone might port it to the newer version of source, but then you still have that same problem. And that's the whole. Even if you're creating something open source, you got to make sure that the libraries and stuff you're using, or like I said, we were talking about programming languages, and I said, I don't care what programming language someone else is using. There's some that I prefer working in, and some I don't like working in. But as long as it's not something where you're dependent on something else like Visual Basic, which I was a big Visual Basic person back in the '90s and early 2000s. But now your code is reliant on something that you don't have control over, and that's basically what's happened here. But then I looked into it a little bit further. So Source is based on Gold SRC, which is a heavily modified version of John Carmack's Quake engine. I was like, oh, well, that's open source under the GPL.
Right.
So if it's GPL, then they should be forced to release their code under the GPL. Although Gold SRC is the game engine used for Half Life, which came out in 1998, and according to Wikipedia, the Quake engine wasn't put under the GPL till 1999, so it was GPL'd after, and that's where legal things get kind of weird. So they GPL'd it after these other people started using it. So I guess they're not forced to follow the rules of the GPL. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's weird. But also, if you look on Wikipedia, it also says that he open sourced it, allowing programmers to edit the engine and add new features. Programmers were soon releasing new versions of the engine on the net. Some of the most popular engines are, and then it lists the Gold SRC. So they're listing it as an engine that used it, but they're making it sound like that Valve used it after it was GPL'd, but they didn't. They licensed it before it was. So
Oh,
that just seems like a little bit of a mess there. I'm gonna real quick look at the comments here, see what people are saying. Hi, we got one person commenting, 4 people watching, which you're probably one of them, right?
yeah.
And so that's that. Which brings me on to. Do you have anything to say about that? Again, I tend to talk too much. Don't let me talk too much. Uh,
No, I'll butt in more.
okay.
No, I don't. I did have something to say about Jitsi just in general because
Okay.
sitting here looking at our interface, which is for those of you watching that don't know, that's actually what we're using to communicate. And my mom was asking me today. She's like, my computer's not working. She has a old 2009 MacBook Pro, and her for whatever reason, and I cannot figure this out for the life of me. If you take the backplate off her MacBook, the CPU cooling fan works. If you put the backplate on, it doesn't work.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's like undervolted, so it just doesn't get started or what. But she was like, I'm having a meeting with my Bible study ladies, and I need to get Zoom working. And I was like, yeah, you really shouldn't use Zoom because we went in and she's like, so I've got this meeting code, and do I send that to them? And I was like, it should really just be as simple as a link. And she's like, I can't find that. I'm like, all right, well, look. And I pulled up Jitsi, and it was so much easier. I was like, you just literally just send them this code, and as long as they're not on a phone, they don't even have to download anything.
Yeah. So and the whole phone thing, I did a video on this. You can well, I don't know about an iPhone. I don't know what she's using, but at least on an Android phone in Brave browser and on Chrome, you can force the desktop site, and it's worked on all my devices so far. But the controls are real
Okay.
small because it thinks you're on a desktop, so like
Yeah.
all the little icons are small. But beyond that, um, Zoom, I had to use it a couple of times when all this, people started using all this stuff, for my kids' schooling. And the first 2 weeks, yeah, we had a link, we went to it, and we were just able to log in or just join the meeting. Then they, people started hacking into it because when Zoom seems to generate meeting IDs, it's just numeric and you can just guess and find meetings. So they started, and then the last time we had to meet up with somebody, I had to create an account to get into the meeting.
Yeah.
Which is them. That's fake security. I talk about fake security all the time. Why is creating an account? How's that stopping anybody? I created it with my junk mail account. It's like that didn't stop me. The password's a good idea, but also coming up with some more randomly generic or randomly not generic meeting IDs would be a good idea. But again, Zoom, I had never heard of it before. But then now it's like when all this started happening, they made it sound like every company does this. We're the leaders in group message conferencing and stuff like that. It's like, and people fell for it. It's basically what it is, and they were not ready for that many people to all of a sudden start using their product. But yeah, the Zoom. I also didn't install. Everybody else I've talked to installs the Zoom app, or there's also plugins for your browser. It works fine in the browser, and I talked about this in a previous video. But you have to say no. I don't want to install the app like 3 times, even on a desktop thing.
Yeah.
And then in little words pop at the bottom of the screen, use in browser. And I think you still had to click that twice for it to allow you to use it in your browser. And the functionality, there were not a lot of features. There were 2 or 3 features that didn't work in the web browser that I guess other people with the app. So the people with the app, they're able to share a whiteboard and everyone was able to draw on it. I was able to see it, but we weren't able to draw on it.
Yeah.
And then we could see ourselves and whoever was talking, but we couldn't do a tile view or see everybody else unless they were talking. We could see a list of names, but we couldn't see the video. We're in the actual app, kind of like we're doing a tile view here, and I can see both of us. Couldn't do that in the web browser on Zoom. So that's a little bit of an annoyance. It was just the interface was not nearly as good. Oh, and then I guess if you have the actual app installed, you can change your background. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was,
Which,
yeah.
I don't. If I recall too, it doesn't work that well. Like you end up like cutting out either like half of your head or.
Yeah, once they're moving around, they move in and out. I mean, it's a gimmicky thing, and which is fine if you want to add that feature. But I didn't mind not having it in the browser. But yeah, so Jitsi, I haven't tried. I've watched a video like 5 years ago on setting up your own Jitsi server, and it's just a couple of commands. It's fairly easy to do. I don't mind using the servers, but I like knowing that it's open source and I can. But that also brings me in the video I recently did on Jitsi. I mentioned just in the video, I was like, it's under an Apache license, so it's not a GPL license. Someone's, and I've talked about this before. What's wrong with the Apache license? And I know I've kind of talked to this sort of thing about you before, and I know you're somewhat new to the whole world of free and open source, and it takes a while to get all the concepts that there's open source, which is great, but then there's free and open source, and they're 2 different things. And some people are like, oh, it's just wording, but it really is a difference in that. Going back to whole like the weirdness here with the Quake engine, because it wasn't originally GPL, so there's like a gray area there. But normally, the GPL license, which is a free license, I create something on GPL and people have to release it under a free license in the future. Mainly the GPL, I think there's a few that are compatible with it. But then if you have a BSD license or an Apache license, or actually there's different BSD licenses. I got yelled at once by Richard Stallman. I don't know if you know who Richard Stallman is. He yelled at me for saying the BSD license, and he's like, there's different BSD licenses, and I guess there are some that are more GPL compatible. Those licenses allow relicensing. So you can take something under the BSD code license and close it all up. And that's basically how we got, iOS and Apple products, because they're all based on BSD and the BSD license. They can close it up, where the GPL is supposed to guarantee that it will always be free. And that benefits the GPL license stuff. I read an article not too long ago talking about OpenOffice versus LibreOffice. I mean, when I first started using Linux, they all came with OpenOffice, and then years ago it got forked and you had OpenOffice and LibreOffice, and it was because there were a group of people who wanted to use a free license rather than just an open license. And since then, LibreOffice has kind of taken over. OpenOffice is still around, and I kind of thought the main reason for it being more popular is because you either care about being free and you're going to choose a free thing, or you don't care and you're going to choose one. So more people are going to lean towards that. But I actually point out how it benefits the GPL license, because the BSD license, since it can be relicensed, you can take stuff from a BSD license and use it in the GPL, but not the other way because the BSD allows the locking down of the license. So every time OpenOffice adds a feature to its product under, I don't know if OpenOffice is under Apache license or BSD license, but they add a feature, LibreOffice can take that and put it in LibreOffice, but stuff that's added to LibreOffice can't be added to OpenOffice because their licensing doesn't allow it. Well, the GPL doesn't allow them to use it with their license, and that's where you get people argue that the BSD license, or sorry, a BSD license is more free, it's less restricting. But that always bothers me because you're saying it's less restricting because it allows people to relicense it and restrict it, and it just doesn't make sense to me. So that's just wording argument.
Get that. It allows you to sell it if you need to.
Well, you can sell GPL stuff.
Yeah.
So the only time a company, in my opinion, anybody would use a license that allows relicensing like that, because it doesn't benefit you. You create a piece of software and you release it under a license. Someone can take it, add to it, and lock it down, and then you don't get back from it. With the GPL license, if they add to it, you have to get it back. And so you should see it as a good thing. So the only time I can see why people would use a BSD license is they either don't understand what's going on, or they plan on locking it down or selling it to someone who's going to lock it down in the future. And also I've watched interviews with people who talk about the BSD license, and they'll ABSD license. Linus Torvalds even said he's like the BSD license is good for software you don't care about. Is basically what he said. His quote is something like that. And you listen to the people who use the BSD license, and they talk like that. They're kind of like, I was watching an interview once. The guy's like, yeah, I like the BSD license because the GPLs, there's just too much to worry about. Following, making sure that you follow the license. So basically, you're saying that you don't care if people follow the license. And he's like, and sometimes with source code, I just release it under the public domain because why? Sometimes I just don't care enough for a license. It's like, yeah, well, that's the exact point. Your license is for something for people who don't care about their software. It's like, I mean, you would think, unless you're planning on taking what you're doing and locking it down in the future, which is why I brought up with the Jitsi thing. I like Jitsi, but who knows? And I've seen companies do it. It's like they're great right now. 5 years from now, they can start locking stuff down. Now, hopefully, if that happens, people can fork it. But someone's got to fork it and start, and since the Apache allows relicensing, they can relicense it under the GPL, and then all the changes they make after that are open, but anything they make on the original project will be locked down. So it's good that it's open source, but I'm not saying that Jitsi's going to eventually lock it down, but they could. And then... yeah, that's to be an annoyance. But also, sometimes things can be unclear, like with the Quake engine and the timing of the releasing of that code. But a question I've had before. Okay, so I've been to a Linux conference, and I've been to some free software conferences. And there's this girl, I can't remember her last name, but her first name was Debbie, and she used to work for the Free Software Foundation. And I forget where she works for now, but I talked to her because she talked about how people would contact the Free Software Foundation trying to find loopholes in the GPL so they can get around following the GPL. And I can see how that would be so frustrating. Like, here you are, you're this foundation that has this license that you're trying to encourage people to use, and people are calling you, basically asking you how to circumvent your license. And I once actually sent a question to the Free Software Foundation, asking them a question, and I wasn't trying to skate around something, but they replied making it sound kind of like I was, and I never got a straight answer. And that is, so one of the things about a GPL license is when you have a program that has artwork in it, okay? So does that artwork have to be under the GPL license? It does under certain circumstances, and that's the unclear part. Basically, they say if the artwork, whether it be images, video, or sound, are required for the program to run, then they have to be released under the GPL. If they're not a requirement for the program, then they're not. Which is silly because pretty much any art in a program can be replaced with other art, and it shouldn't change the functionality of the game. And like one of those examples is like Doom. So the original Doom the source code is released under the GPL license, but the original game, the assets, the sound, the pictures, the music and the levels are all under a copyright still. That's why when you install Doom, from the Linux repositories, you can install the shareware version, which gives you the first 9. If you have the original copies like I do, you can copy the WAD file over from the original game and have the full version of the game. And then there's the Free Doom project, which is basically that project was replacing all the assets with open stuff. But it's like, technically Doom is no good without those assets, and until someone created replacements for it, then they're a requirement. But people eventually, it's just, so I asked them, I sent them a question saying, okay, so here's an example, Doom. Doom's no good without the assets, but I can replace the assets. And the reason I'm asking this is because I create video games and I release my code under GPL. I go and I'll get assets that are open, like under a Creative Commons license, and some Creative Commons licenses are GPL compatible, some are not.
Yeah.
I'm just like, at what point am I not doing this right? It's like,
Yeah.
and not that not that I don't think I'm going to get in trouble. It's not like I have any of these big projects and I'm the source code owner, but it's like if I use artwork, yeah, that's one of those gray, confusing areas to me, and I still never got a straight answer. I don't worry about it too much, but I wish someone would give me a straight answer on that.
Well, it's kind of like what is it? Free use licensing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like news articles and any kind of media in general. There's like a certain point when you cross a gray line.
Yeah.
Between using it and then like repurposing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, found that odd.
Well, that's where it comes into like, you have stuff that's in the public domain. That's out of the copyright, or the copyright owner just says, I'm putting this in the public domain. Other than that, someone has a copyright on it. And I draw a smiley face right now, I have a copyright on that. I can even take a song or something that's out of copyright, but if I re-perform that song, my re-performance of it is under a copyright. So for people to use that, I have to say it's okay, and I have to say what it's okay for. I can either say public domain, or the whole point of, for art, the Creative Commons, which makes it simple. And the thing is, it's like, for it to be GPL compatible, it's got to have that whole share alike, which allows you to make changes and allow others to make changes. I think that's one of the requirements. That's,
Yeah, and fair use, I think, also says, like, if I take your performance, the re-performance of that song that you have copyright on, and I use just a little bit of it, and like redub it over, it becomes a new and novel work or something.
Well,
like that.
You're getting into fair use, which is kind of just, for me, fair use just shows how messed up copyrights are. But like stuff like that, saying only 10, if you use under 10 seconds, that's just something people say. I don't know if there's any legal standing to that, and if there is, that's just a judge once said that. It's not really law, but judges look at what judges have said in the past, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. Tom Scott, this British guy on YouTube, I don't know if you ever watch any of his videos. He does lots of different types of videos. He recently did a very good video talking about that, and talking about some of the stuff people do on YouTube, which I always drives me crazy. When someone like will take a song and make a parody video, but they don't change the song at all, and at the end they're like, due copyright to the original creators, I don't claim to have the copyright. Like, that's going to protect them. But it doesn't matter because it's on YouTube, and YouTube's handling that. You're not going to get in trouble for posting something on YouTube other than getting your account booted, because YouTube is the middleman. And people will complain about stuff YouTube does, but really they're doing it because the system's broke, but they're finding the best thing to do for the system that's in place that benefits them and benefits us. You may not like it all, but it's not really YouTube, it's the copyright laws. Let me just, again, check. There's lots of comments here. Let's see what people are saying. Woo! Scott Hale's been talking a lot. Much younger with he says you look younger with the hat on. Do you hang with Luke Smith? Do you live near each other? So, Luke Smith used to live in Georgia. I did a live chat with him once, a live video with him once on his channel. We live about 6-7 hours from each other. He lives up near the Panhandle. I don't know exactly where. He told me when we talked. People don't realize I live in Florida, which is a very long... Where I live, I can drive for 6 hours in a straight line and still not get out of the state. And he's a little bit before that. So I think he's like 5-6 hours from where I live. And I would love... We talked about if I'm ever in the area that I could visit him. And I drive, but it's like, even if I'm heading out of the state, I'd still have to head an hour west to get to his place, and I wouldn't do that just to have lunch with the guy. Um, but yeah, no, Luke Smith, I love his videos. Me and him are a lot on the same mindset in a lot of ways. He seems like a pretty cool guy. Although I've seen a lot of comments, people saying he's a Nazi. I've watched all his videos. I have not seen anything that implies that to me. He does get a little political sometimes, and I think people just like calling people with different political views Nazis. So um, I don't think he's a Nazi, but I haven't seen it. He does have a shaved head, so maybe he's a skinhead. I don't know. No, he seems like a very nice guy, though. A lot of his latest videos are talking about dependency and not being dependent on other people, and like learning to grow your own food and cook and stuff like that, which is a view I've always had. It's like that's one of the reasons I like open source. Even if you're not going to write source code, to have the ability to edit the source code is important. Just like I'm not a mechanic, but I try to learn about my car. Like I recently, just last year, learned how to change my own oil, and I do it at a friend's house. And the last time, I pretty much did it all myself. And when I have friends work on my car, I'm over their shoulder asking them questions. And I may not do it myself because I'm afraid of breaking my car, but at least I'm learning. It's that a little bit less. There's always going to be points in life where you need somebody's help. Friends, family, whoever. But you should put that to a minimum as possible, at least with knowledge. And a lot of his videos. So let's see. Naples Drone Solution, you got a website. So he's asking if you have a website. I don't know if you want to type that in the comments. NaplesDroneSolutions.com, I'm assuming, is what it is?
Yep.
Um, are you fighting fires from home? No, I'm still working a regular work schedule as far as a firefighter, although things have been really, really quiet lately. Um, as a firefighter, where I live, and this is different places, we run medical calls alongside the ambulance. And yes, it makes sense. People ask all the time. I'm not even going to get into it because I've explained it so many times. It makes sense. It saves money. Trust me. But I would say about 80% of our calls are medical calls. We're barely getting any medical calls right now. And I'm assuming just because people don't want to go to the hospital because it's on lockdown. If you go there, you're probably going to get sick, which kind of goes to show how many of the calls we get aren't really emergencies and it's just people milking the system, in my opinion. Um, but most of my calls lately have been vehicle accidents and median fires, and my call load is about a third of what it normally is this time of year. Although right now we're where we live, we have season. It's tourist season. Basically, from Thanksgiving to Easter is tourist season, and our population like triples, if not quadruples. And so our call volume goes up. Driving and traffic is annoying, but usually right after Easter, things tend to slow down. So I don't know if a lot of people are staying at home, don't want to go to hospital as part of it, but I'm thinking a lot of people may have headed back up north a little early, might have added to it. So no, I'm not fighting fires from home. I'm working a regular schedule as of right now. And let's see. Can I come? Some chat love. Come on, viewers. Nobody wants to chat. Thank you for responding, guys. Not trying. Speed to you. Are you both? Yes, we are both in Naples. We're about, what, 10 minutes from each other? I live kind of way out in the middle of nowhere, and you live on the edge of town.
Yep,
Pretty much. It takes me 15 minutes to get to the interstate, which is basically that's where Walmart and Target are, and the rest, and that's where town really starts. Although everything's been growing out this way a lot lately, more and more neighborhoods. But I pretty much live in the swamp, in the Everglades. But there are gated neighborhoods going up all around my area, which is good because I already bought my house at a good price, and gated neighborhoods going up around the area and roads getting widened just increases the property value. So good for me because I own a house in town that I've lost a lot of money on. So it's nice that it's balancing out. So let's see. Let me look at my notes here. Oh, so the next thing I have. Oh, and again, I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, no, Scott asked what programming languages we're competent in. It depends on how you define competency for me. I'm only really like fluent in HTML, which is really sad because that's like basically 5 tags.
Yeah, I mean that's not a
But
programming language, but you're getting pretty good with JavaScript, which was
I'm
actually
getting there.
my next topic was about that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, as far as being fluent in programming languages, I'm really good with Bash scripts, obviously, and I'm pretty good with JavaScript. Although there's still some JavaScript concepts that when I look, because different people, you can write things different ways, and I see the way people write stuff, and it confuses me sometimes because there's different ways to do stuff. But I know how to write stuff myself. Other than that, I dabble a lot. I used to be pretty good with Python. I'm pretty rusty with it now because I just never use it. Um, I used to really love it, and I still use it sometimes if I have to interact with hardware, and I want to script something that interacts with some hardware sometimes because it's just easier than trying to do it with Bash script, which is basically going to be using an executable of some sort. At first, when I first learned about Python and I saw the whole they force you to indent to keep your code nice, I thought that was awesome. I absolutely hate that concept now because it's like you're writing code and then you go and find some sample code that goes what you want to do, and then you try to copy and paste that into your code, and the indenting gets all screwed up. And there are times where there's no way that code indenting can figure out what's supposed to be indented and not in certain situations.
Right.
It's like, okay, I have a for loop, and then when the for loop's done, I want this command to run. There's no way for a automatic indentation, to know where that for loop ends, and stuff like that. And so that kind of drove me away from it. But I used to be pretty good with it. Other than that, I know a little bit of C. I'm doing a C tutorial right now, a series right now on my YouTube channel, which I avoided for a long time because C is one of those things that, it's lower level, so the people who do it take it more serious, and they're very strict on the way you do stuff. So it's like, they want to be efficient, and if you program something in C wrong, you can cause buffer overflows, which scares me to try to teach somebody something that can, if I do it wrong and I teach it wrong, then they can cause a buffer overflow, even though, whatever. But I finally broke down, and I'm doing a series on it now, and I'm in the last few videos of it where I'm cross-compiling for Windows, from Linux for Windows, on Linux for a Linux device like a Raspberry Pi, cross-compiling for ARM, and then the last video I think I have in this series that I'm doing is cross-compiling on your desktop Linux for an Android device, which is basically just statically compiling all the libraries into the executable, because although the libraries are probably on the Android system somewhere, they're a different place than my desktop, so you just have to statically embed is the easiest way to do it, which causes your program to go from like 10 kilobytes up to like 400 kilobytes, just for a simple hello world program, which isn't huge. It's a huge difference though. Um, and someone asked me in a video today, what about using libraries like curl for like cross-compiling for Windows? So right before we did this video, I started looking into that, and it can be done. You can cross-compile for Windows on Linux using libraries, but then you have to make sure the libraries, like the files, you have to move the libraries to right folders and link to it. And I was most of the way there, and I was still getting an error. But at that point, I'd probably just spin up a Windows machine, because really, it's nice to be able to cross-compile, but you really should always test your software on real hardware, on like a real Windows machine, just to make sure, or at least in a virtual machine, not even real hardware. Something that's always bothered me is that I can cross-compile for all these systems from Linux, but I'm pretty sure you can't cross-compile for Mac OS. I think if you're writing in C and you want to compile for a Mac operating system, you have to have Apple hardware, or at least Apple software. I guess you can have a Hackintosh, which is just crazy to me, that you would think if anything, you'd be able to compile, since it's based on BSD, that you'd be able to compile on BSD. Maybe you can. Maybe you can compile for Apple on a BSD system, but I haven't seen anything for it, and it's been years since I've looked. But it's like, so if I want to develop software, at least compiled C software for an Apple system, I have to buy legally their hardware. Because I know you can make a Hackintosh, but that's not necessarily legal. And that's just a headache in itself.
It's
Although
so much
you've done
fun.
that before.
Yeah, no, and actually that kind of brings us back. Right, I'm not fluent in many. I wouldn't say I'm excellent at some of them, but I have a little bit of experience with Python. I've been playing around with that as I've tried to get my head around machine learning, SQL, PHP, HTML, JavaScript, and then I started in hardware, doing just building computers, and so
Mm-hmm.
one of my hardest things was building a Hackintosh. And mostly because I think I've narrowed it down to I used the processor with built-in graphics, and then I wanted to run Final Cut Pro off of a dedicated GPU, um, which is really really hard to do because you have to use a Mac Pro um, profile, but they didn't come with uh, built-in graphics.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of screw up all of your kernel settings by doing that. But yeah, no, those are they're fun though. I mean, it's a lot of fun to read that a $6,000 Mac is coming out and it matches specs with your $1,200 computer.
um, I'm just looking at the comments. Someone asked, "How do y'all feel about pineapples on pizza?" He's
I
for it.
love pineapples on pizza.
I'm not a huge fan, but I'll eat it. You know, I'm not going to complain. I think the only thing I've really had on pizza was I'm going back 15, 20 years. I was at a friend's house and we all ordered a pizza, and he ordered sardines on the side. And I'm up. I'm not a picky eater. I'm like, I'll try it. I tried it. I'm not gonna have sardines again. I would not buy a Hawaiian pizza, ham and pineapple. But if someone has it at a party, I'll eat it. It's just not my first choice. I like pepperoni, mushrooms, and olives. That's or meat lovers is good. But if I'm just going like basic toppings, pepperoni with either mushrooms or olives. I like pepperoni and mushrooms. My daughter isn't a big fan of mushrooms. She likes olives. So usually if we go out, we'll do pepperoni and olives.
Yeah, my primary pizza of choice is a pineapple only.
Pineapple only, not even the ham.
Well, the way I see it is that ham is just adding salt to the
Mm-hmm.
salt that already exists. So
Yeah.
the only place that I break that rule is California Pizza Kitchen has really good Hawaiian with like scallions and stuff that
Mm.
helps balance some of that. Somebody asked if Naples Drone Solutions is my primary income. It is. I also have a company called Florida Aerial Survey Technologies that does surveying with drones. That's a secondary income for me. And Naples Drone Solutions is actually just a brand of professional drone solutions that has an office in North Florida. So we service the whole state. Any other questions?
Uh,
Sausage and mushrooms is what Scott likes. And Slacking Source doesn't really like pepperoni.
yeah, which is I once watched a video where this guy was complaining about pepperoni on pizza. He was talking about the worst toppings. He's like, first of all, cheese is not a topping; it's part of pizza, which I kind of agree with. Because you can get extra cheese. But he's like, pepperoni, that's just grease. He's like, and it means peppers in Italian, and they're not even peppers, so it's not even really pepperoni. And like, it still tastes good. It's grease. Yeah, that's why it tastes good. It's
Yeah.
I describe pepperoni as salami, which I love, but better. But really, I like you got to be in the mood. It's like a pepperoni sandwich by itself. I'll eat it, but I might prefer it. But
Ooh.
pepperoni and salami together on a sandwich, that's good. Um, where'd you all meet? Um, Basically, we both went to the same church, but we were again different ages, about 10 years or so, and so like we knew each other again, who each other were for a while. But again, he's Andrew is good friends with my sister-in-law, and he obviously is an entrepreneur, and he actually do you still do the mag sheet thing, or is that
I
okay?
still have a bunch of them.
He created a well, you talk about it.
Yeah, it's a sheath for a knife. But the whole idea was I grew up. My father owns a construction company, and when I came home from college, I wanted a way that I could wear my utility knife that was more accessible than a nylon pouch and kind of looked cool. So I created a two-piece magnet that was basically inside a little leather pouch that stick a knife on the side of a belt, and it actually turned out really well. I still use it to this day. I've had like the same one for 3 years or something like that I've been
Mm-hmm.
using. Made 500 of them and sold about 50 of them so far.
And it really is a great product. He basically he called me up or contacted me because he wanted to give some firefighters to test them out and see if we like them and stuff like that. So he gave me a few. I handed them out, and I wore mine for a long time. And I like it because it's not just for knives. I mean, it's great. I still use it when I'm doing work and I'm working with screws. Like you're working on the computer or something, and you have all these little screws. You just go boop, and they stick to your belt. and then you pull them off when you need them. Or if you're working with a screwdriver, you're up on a ladder. It's great. I stopped wearing mine regularly uh, because, not to diss your product, but I carry a pocket knife in my pocket,
Yeah.
and there were 3 times where the magnet pulled it out of my pocket and opened it up part way,
Yeah.
and I ended up stabbing my hand.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I could have just moved the magnet to the other side of my pants, but I just kind of stopped wearing it. It's actually on the safe in my office, and I have a knife hanging there on it. So that's why I'm using it as a magnetic knife holder right now.
I use them as storage. I actually have like 6 of them on the metal racks
Mm-hmm.
outside in my garage because I use them for various tools. I held a 16-pound sledgehammer off my hip,
Yeah.
so they are very strong. I kind of saw that issue with folders being an issue because basic folding knives, they kind of lend themselves well to being in the like spot where your pocket meets and just being able to pull them out. But I made it really for utility knives, and I think I never experimented with like handguns, but I always was very curious if
It holds my handgun.
you know. I
um,
don't know if you'd want it just sitting out there.
yeah. I like a sheath that covers up my trigger.
Yeah, no, I definitely I made it, and my whole thought was I had an entrepreneur buddy of mine that he built a website, and he actually was featured on Discovery.com for a while. It was a game, and he told me, he's like, I've spent like a few $100,000 making this gaming website, and I don't know that I've made that much from Discovery on it, but the way that I see it is if I spend a couple $100,000 and I make a game that my kids can play, well, then that's worth it to me. And this was kind of that's how I looked at this. I'm like, if I spend a few grand and I make a product, like there was a couple of things I really wanted to learn. I wanted to learn manufacturing processes, how to work with factories in China, how to iterate through designs. And if I do all that, and at the end of the day, I have a nice product, then basically I took a class
Mm-hmm.
for $2,000, and I've got something that might sell, and I might be able to make all my money back.
Yeah, I want to correct what you said because I'm pretty sure you said that by accident. You said a little while back. You said spend a couple $100,000.
Nope. Yeah.
A couple $100,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I thought you meant a couple of hundred or a grand. Okay. I thought you misspoke.
No. He was a well-off guy, so he wanted to do a website, and I think that was his way of justifying. Like every entrepreneur has times where they just want to kick themselves for starting what they started because headaches occur.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was his way of like coping with some of those headaches. It's like, well, I can go to bed at night because at least I know that I've made something that my kids can use and they like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's worth something to me,
Mm-hmm.
And if I lose that money, then darn it.
Someone asked what knives we recommend, and I really don't have any recommendations, but I'll tell you a story. Years ago, for my anniversary or my birthday or something, my wife got me a really nice Crishaw knife, and I loved it. And I think I lost it at Disney Springs. I was on a road trip, and I always had it in my pocket, and I had it on the way back. From the trip, we were driving through Orlando, so we stopped at Disney Springs, which is like it's not Disney World, it's a shopping center run by Disney, but they have boat rides and just fun stuff to do, and it's all free. So we usually stop there because the kids love it. And I was wearing what do they call them? Fanny bag. I know what we used to call them back in the '90s, and that's politically incorrect now. But and I think what happened was because I had it when I got there, and then when I got home, I didn't have it anymore. I think I might have adjusted the strap from the fanny bag, and it might have pulled the knife out of my pocket, but I never saw it again. And it was like I don't know how much my wife paid, but I looked in replacing it, and it was like a $50 knife, but I couldn't find that exact one. So I just needed a knife because I've carried a knife on me since I was 10. I got my first little Swiss Army knife when I was 10, and it's just such a useful tool. I don't know how I use my knife 10 times a day. So I went online and I found this one on Amazon for $6 or $8 or something like that. and it was just going to be a temporary one, but I've ended up loving it. I bought my wife the same exact one in a metallic pink, and I've bought them as gifts for people. I don't know if the tip here is supposed to be a screwdriver, but I use it as a screwdriver. But also, I've never tried, but I'm pretty sure as a firefighter, if I need a center punch to pop a window out, I'm pretty sure that that will work. So I like it. I can just pull it out and something with it. And it's the little assist, tension assist. So I like that. It's got serrated and a flat blade. So for $8, like I said, I bought a few of these for gifts. It says Tac Force on it. And it comes in all different colors. Blue. I think they have one that's firefighter thing, but I think it was $2 more. And
Yeah.
I'm a firefighter, but I'm not all ate up about being a firefighter. I don't wear firefighter shirts and stuff like that. Um,
My everyday carry is a Leatherman Wave. Being in the construction trade, it's an expensive knife. They run like $100,
mm-hmm.
but it's 17 tools. And I when I came back from college, I learned a lot of good life lessons. And one of the lessons that I kind of stuck with was, if I need something 3 times, I don't really care what it costs. I'm just going to end up getting it, because if I've needed it 3 times in a week,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to need it. And every time, we talk about ways that mag sheath falls short. I was getting on a dock in the middle of a rainstorm, and the dock had tension lines that kept the boat off. It had like little arms, that were made of like PVC to
Mm-hmm.
keep, instead of bumpers. And so I hopped on the front of a pontoon boat in the pouring rain, and the line caught the space between my belt and my knife, and I heard plop, and I was like, "What was that plop?" I went to go get in my car, and my seatbelt stuck to my hip, and I was like, I know exactly what that plop was. And I was like, man, that was $100. I just lost $100 in a canal, and I was like, I'm not gonna buy another one. And the next day, I needed it 3 times.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, whatever. I mean, it's got pliers and both Phillips and flathead in 2 different sizes, scissors, wire strippers. I mean, it's got everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really, really sturdy knife. All the blades lock for a multi-tool. That's a rare thing. In terms of everyday carry, the first knife my dad ever got me, I've been carrying since I was 10 as well, but the first knife my dad got me was a Kershaw. Actually, probably the same one you had, because I couldn't find it when I lost mine
um, Someone asked if I'm a volunteer firefighter. No, I am paid. I am full time. There are a lot of volunteer firefighters out there. Supposedly, it's like 70% of firefighters in the U.S. are volunteer, unpaid. And my view on that is the same as when it comes to software development. It's great people will do the work for free, but they should be paid. It bothers me that there's so many unpaid, and I get there's a lot of very rural areas out there that just don't have the population to pay their firefighters. But if you have a McDonald's in your town and they make enough money to pay their employees, you should have enough money to pay your firefighters. But there's situation to situations, but I think more firefighters should be paid and aren't. But it's great that people volunteer their time like that. Someone asked if my wife works. My wife is a certified occupational therapist. Um, and she used to be full time until we had kids, and now she works PRN. So basically, they'll call her up occasionally and say, "Hey, we have some hours. Do you want to work them?" And she can choose to work them or not. Doing that is nice because she basically makes time and a half, but doesn't get benefits. But that's fine because she gets benefits through my job. And normally, I mean, right now she hasn't been working because of this whole Corona thing. I don't think they've called her. But she'll pick up just a couple of days a month, which is nice because we do homeschool all the time, not just because of the virus. And that's a lot of work for her, planning lessons and teaching the kids. But it's with my work schedule because I work a 24-hour shift and I have 48 hours off. So I work 24 hours every third day with 2 days off in between. So basically, the only time she'll take hours at work is if I'm not working. So that way we never have to pay a babysitter or stuff like that. Because she looked into doing full time. So basically, if she was to work full time and not get the time and a half hours she gets when she does work and get the benefits that we don't really need because we get them through my job, in the end, after paying for like a daycare or something like that, uh, we pretty much break even, and then she's working full time, you know. So it's like it's better that she doesn't, you know, because daycare stuff is expensive. And now my daughter's old enough, I guess she'd be going to elementary school. You know, she's technically in second grade. My son is in kindergarten. Well, I guess just finished kindergarten. Um, let's see. So yes, my wife works, but just a couple days a month as far as paid work, but full time teacher for both my kids. You guys are dealing more with car accidents than fires nowadays. Um, yeah, I mean, where we live in Naples, most houses are fairly new construction. You know, it's not like New York City where things are, you know, tall buildings that are 100 years old and have newspaper for insulation in the walls. You know, so when we get fires here, and we do get them, people ask me how often I get fires. We get fire calls all the time, but they're usually contained to an area because of fire codes. As far as like full blown house fires, I get two or three a year, personally myself, you know, and it's a big county and there's three different shifts. Um, but yeah, we get fires all the time. Most of what we get this time of year, especially because we're in dry season in Florida. So we have tourist season in winter and rainy season in the summer. In the summer it rains all the time. In the winter it doesn't rain at all and everything gets dry. And we get a lot of median fires because people flick their cigarettes out the window. And so basically we go there and we actually have a little tiny basically garden hose that we got just for that because unloading the entire hose to fight a little fire in the median like this is ridiculous. And you don't want to use an extinguisher because then you got to fill it back up. And you try to use a shovel and it just rekindles. So we get a lot of median fires. But walking down Airport Road is one of the main roads we have here in town. And I have walked down that median because of fires like this. And there's mulch, but there's almost as many cigarette butts as there is mulch. There's so many people flicking cigarettes in there, and it's so obnoxious. I hate smokers for so many reasons.
Cigarette butts are the single biggest source of plastic pollution in the world.
Plastic?
Plastic.
Yeah.
Because those filter cartridges are made of plastic. And the oh shoot, I wish I remembered the numbers better on it. I read a study the other day about how like god awful they are for our environment. They're the most common form of litter, and they're also the worst, basically the worst for the world because there's so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a socially accepted thing still, even today.
My wife's not a nurse. She's an occupational therapist. They're not nurses. Sorry, someone. Yeah, that's. So they work with nurses, and there's different levels of nurses. I'm not knocking nurses, but completely different jobs. An occupational therapist, and this isn't a complete accuracy, but they're a lot like physical therapists. They work along with their physical therapists. They do therapy for people after they've had surgeries. It's just they focus on different things than physical therapists. Um, uh, Someone smokes, but they don't use filters for the environment. Uh, that's okay. I wasn't giving you a hard time. I was just clarifying that she's not a nurse. You know. So let's see. Next thing on my list of things to talk about. Today, Andrew, we were talking about programming, and Andrew has learned a lot in the time that I've known him when we've worked on coding. And you worked on a project today, basically a form for some people to fill out that does some calculations on some pay stuff. And you sent it to me. I asked you to send me the code. You know, it's basic one-page HTML and some JavaScript code. And I was really hoping that
was purposeful, by the way.
Huh?
That was purposeful because I had to send that file to the end user, and I didn't. They wouldn't have gotten how to unpack
right
JavaScript pages. So I thought one page, and then they click a button, and
yeah.
it shows up.
Yeah. With a small project like that, it's okay to do stuff in one page. But then as projects get bigger, you got to start splitting things up, and it just makes things clearer. But yeah, one package like that is nice. And I was hoping that you'd send it to me and your code would be a mess and I'd be able to clean it up a lot for you. But your code is actually very clean, very nicely done. I don't know if you look. I made a few changes, which were very little changes. Just
get a chance to look at those.
basically, I did three main things. I set it so that anytime in the form you hit enter, it submits the because you had it to where you type stuff and then you gotta click a button. And if I can avoid touching the mouse, I can. So I set it up so that anywhere in the form, if you anywhere in the body of the HTML, you hit enter, it runs that function. I wrote a function that rounds to the nearest second decimal. I don't know if that
Oh,
you
my
want
wife
that.
was asking for that.
Yes, so I did that and double check. I'm pretty sure I did it right. It's rounding properly. Um, and then I also did something that might actually make the code run a little slower, but cleaned up the code because we talked about how um, you didn't use jQuery, which I used to use jQuery a lot, and I still do, but I'm trying to get more into just pure HTML. But with jQuery, you have the shorter code when you're saying instead of writing document get element by ID this ID. So instead of importing the jQuery library, I just wrote a function that's shorter. So basically, shortened up your code. So you just say ID and then give it the ID name, and it runs that function, which technically probably slows down the code, but I think it cleans it up a little bit. It saves on typing. But at the same time, in Vim, I have a shortcut I just type get ID, and it types out the code for me. So it doesn't really matter. I was just showing you different options on stuff you can do.
I like
But yeah, I added the rounding to the second decimal function and the submit on because if I can avoid touching the keyboard or touching the mouse, I do. you know.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's all I changed that. But yes, I was very impressed. Your code is very good.
Rudimentary, but I wrote it all from scratch, which helps. Normally, when you see code that I do, it's like I go take from one project and the other project. It's all piecemeal, which is why it all looks like crap.
Someone wrote jQuery is at least better than React. I've never used React, so I'm not too familiar with it. I like jQuery a lot, but pure JavaScript has gotten better. They've added some functionality that's a lot like jQuery because you can even do like a document query select all or something like that, and give it basically. It's kind of like searching for. I haven't looked into the details on it. I just noticed it the other day while working on something. It's kind of like get by ID, but you can give it the dot and dot whatever for class dot whatever. It's more like the jQuery thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's a few other things they've added that allow for a little bit shorter of code. And the main one of the main reasons I'm switching jQuery is on a lot of websites, so it's not an issue. But I write Chrome plugins for certain stuff, or I've been using Phantom JS for a lot of stuff, which is uses JavaScript for scraping stuff from the page, and I got so used to using jQuery that when I'm trying to scrape a page using one of those methods that doesn't have jQuery in it, which most of them do already, but not, then I have to add to my code to embed jQuery in the page and then run the function. So I'm trying to get better about writing stuff in pure JavaScript so that I don't have to do that when I'm scraping web pages or automating stuff with plugins I write or extensions, whatever you want to call them. Uh, Technically, plugins and extensions are different, I know. No, I have not looked more into the Colbot game. I mean, we looked at the. I looked at the Wikipedia page last night. I saw that it's in the repositories. We just need to get into it. But answer me this: if you've played with it before, because the Wikipedia page didn't say, is it a multiplayer game? Is it something that we can play together, or is it a single player? Let's see. Uh,
Somebody's throwing out your old username.
when did you drop Metal X 1000? I still use Metal X 1000. I think at some point, like my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Metal X 1000. But I think at some point, YouTube encouraged us to enter a name, and I did, and it started showing that as the name. But my channel is still Metal X 1000. So, who wants to know the story of where I got the name Metal X 1000? All five of you that are watching. So here's the quick rundown because I've thought about doing a video on this before, and I don't know if people care. I hate when people go to use a username, it's taken, and they just add numbers to the end of it. Which obviously my username is kind of one of those, right? Metal X 1000. Years ago, 15 years ago, I came up with a username, Digital Metal. That was my username. Okay? And I got it because I was listening to the song Metal, which was a cover Nine Inch Nails did of a Gary Newman song. And I was like, metal, that's cool. I like that. But metal is kind of taken everywhere. So then I'm like, digital metal. And that wasn't taken. So I started creating accounts with digital metal, including a Gmail account. Uh, then I started using MetalX1000 as my junk mail account, for junk mail stuff. Well, then I started doing Google was kind of, new with YouTube and all this stuff. So I create all these junk accounts that ended up being my main accounts, and I couldn't switch the usernames, so I just kind of stopped using Digital Metal and had to keep using Metal X 1000. And now I've used it so much, I am stuck with it.
So there you go.
But I much prefer Digital Metal. I thought that sounded a lot cooler. I've kind of feared telling that story because I was afraid someone might steal it and start using it on all these sites, but I'm not going to use it, so go ahead. Whatever.
What's funny to me is Metal X 1000 almost sounds like a GPU driver.
Well, the X part. So instead of just Metal 1000, here's another thing. So back in the 90s, a big thing was being straight edge. You know what being straight edge means?
I don't.
Okay.
Back in the 90s, I was like 5.
I know. That's why I ask. And I never called myself straight edge, but technically I fell into the category, and I had friends that would go call themselves straight edge. Straight edge is basically someone who decides to not drink, do drugs, and be promiscuous. A lot of them were like punk rock guys, and some of them were real hardcore about it, like they beat the crap out of people who did or something like that. I don't know about that. My friends didn't do that, but they would use people. They would put X's on their hands. They would draw in marker big black X's, which I guess started because if you went to a nightclub that allowed underage people in, they would put X's on their hands so the bartender knew not to serve them drinks. So then the straight edge crew started doing that, and they had shirts with X's on them. And my friends who were all straight edge, all their usernames were like my buddy Austin. His was X Austin X, which always just sounded like a porn thing to me. But when I was creating my junk mail name, I didn't just want to be Metal 1000, so I just added an X in there because of that. It's just kind of like, I'm just like, what letter can I randomly throw in there? X's are cool, and it kind of referenced back to that. But no, it's funny because um, it's just, well, one, my friend who was straight edge now drinks. He doesn't do drugs or anything like that. It's just funny how it was funny because I remember having a conversation with him and his now wife, his girlfriend at the time. They're talking about how all their friends went off to college and they all tell them, "Oh, when you go off to college, you're not going to be straight edge anymore." And they're like, "Oh, no, we're going to be straight edge forever." And they're not anymore because they technically because they drink alcohol. And I never called myself straight edge, but I've never had a drink in my life. I've never done drugs. I think I'm more to the definition, and I just don't like the labels. And
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I feel like I've heard that term before, but I never knew what it meant.
yeah, someone's asking if it's wait, not doing any drugs is straight edge or any hard drugs. As far as I know, any drugs. Well, I mean, they probably take aspirin and stuff if that's what you mean. And again, I think there were different people that were at different levels of it. Like, I think there was even a point where a lot of them would be vegetarians or vegans, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're not really straight edge if you're not a vegan." And my buddy, his again girlfriend at the time, wife now, she went vegetarian for a while. She went vegan for a while, and she talked him into being a vegetarian. And this is a boy who lived on Slim Jims. He would buy them by the case from Sam's Club and just snack on them all day long. Decides to go. I love telling this story. He loved them, but she wanted him to go, vegetarian because cruelty to animals. And I said to him, I had a conversation with him. This is when he was off at college. And he was back visiting, and I said to him, I said, "Hey man, if you want to go vegetarian because you think it's cruel to animals, that's fine. That's great. But I'm gonna tell you right now, it is very hard to be a vegetarian and live healthy. It's like you can do it, but there's so many things. And this is back in the 90s. I worked at GNC. That's GNC, not GMC, General Nutrition Center. So I was studying a lot of stuff on health stuff, and it's just like protein's a big one, but also vitamin B. You can get vitamin B and protein through certain vegetables, but most vegetables and fruits don't have vitamin B in them, and it can cause mental problems like memory loss and stuff if you don't get enough vitamin B, energy loss. So you can do it, but you have to be careful what you get. And he's like, no, no, no. He goes, it's the healthiest thing you can do. I've read all these articles by doctors saying it's so great, it's so healthy. I'm like, yeah, if you do it right. And the boy didn't like vegetables. He didn't like tofu. So he basically didn't eat anything. And like 6 months later, he comes back from college with his girlfriend. We're at Denny's in the middle of the night. And his girlfriend looks at me and she goes, "So, did you hear Austin's eating meat again?" And I looked at him, I go, really? And he kind of just put his head down. And I go, why is that? He goes, doctor's orders. So Austin, who's basically the same height as me, his weight got down to like 108 pounds.
Oh,
Yeah, so he got super skinny, and he started getting sick because he was so skinny. And what was happening was he would cough, and he said his insides would hurt. What happened was his body fat got so low because he basically wasn't eating anything that his immune system was down, so he'd get sick. And when he would cough hard, his organs inside would slam into each other because they didn't have fat around them and bruise.
wow.
Yeah. So his doctor ordered him to start eating meat again. So
That's crazy.
someone's asked if I've ever had a drink. When I was a teenager, once or twice, my dad used to drink scotch, a glass when you get home. He let me stick my finger in it, and I've tasted it once or twice, and I did not like it. And I'm just, I never had the urge or desire to. If you want to do it responsibly, that's fine with me. I never saw the point. I see it ruining some people's life, and you never know if you're going to be one of those people. So why chance it? Was my view, but I'm not gonna diss you if you're doing it responsibly. Uh, Jesus drank wine, so I can't argue. um, let's see.
You're not really straight edge unless you eat a diet of wild mushrooms. Makes me completely straight edge.
Mm-hmm. All they ate were French fries. Seriously.
Oh yeah. Oreos, by the way, are vegan, so you can eat Oreos.
There you go.
Which I've got to think that Nabisco, if you're doing it to prevent animal cruelty, and then you're like paying large multinational conglomerates, I feel like that's a little bit counterproductive.
Yeah, it's like, is Nabisco have some other products? Yeah, it's just one of
Right?
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's like with every company, it's like there's some companies I don't buy stuff from and I don't use because of things that companies done. And there's every company you can look at and find something to pick on. It's just everyone has their own limits. It's like this company did this, and this, and that was the drawing line for me.
Yeah.
Like I won't buy Apple products because I don't like that company. In fact, I've thought of, to me, the absolute worst gift someone could give me is an Apple gift card, right? Because you can't return it. I don't want to use it, but if I don't use it, then Apple just gets the money. I don't want to give it to somebody else. 'Cause I don't want to encourage them to use it. So I guess if someone ever gave me an Apple gift card, do they sell flash drives or something that I could use? So at least I can use it, so they're not just keeping the money. It's like
$5 Apple gift card.
it's like I can't think, and that's why it's like sometimes people are like, oh, a gift card's a nice thing, whatever. But it's like, yeah, but just make sure because there are certain outlets that people, like I shop at Walmart, but there's some people who really don't like Walmart. Although most people who don't like Walmart still shop there, so whatever. but it's like I don't buy someone a gift card unless I know that it's a company that like someplace they shop often. Um, let's see. Yeah, the French fry thing. People who constantly push
You
veganism
could
annoy
buy
me.
music. Why would you do that when you have Spotify?
You don't actually
I have
buy music. You pay for the rights to use it.
well, I pay Spotify for the right for them to figure out what I want to listen to. That's what I pay for. They do a pretty good job of it, so I'm happy. And I've also got the family plan, and I have like my whole family on it, so it's actually only $3 a month per user, which I think is fair. I've lived in Florida my whole life. Answer that
Except
question.
someone asked.
Both live
I'm
in
trying to
Florida.
catch up. I'm seeing someone says their name is Jacksonville, and their middle name is Atlantic City.
Yeah, because Scott said that he didn't like anyone named after a city.
Oh, my buddy Austin.
Yeah.
uh, never been economy based. Well, more dependent on gambling. You both give Florida your whole life. I moved to Florida when I was 10 from Douglaston, Long Island, in New York. So I've lived here long enough that you can say it's my whole life. I mean, my life before 10. My life has been very evenly cut up by decades. So I was born in 81 and I moved to Florida in 91 when I was 10. So like my first 10 years, like if I remember something in New York, I know I was 10 or under, you know? And then I had from 10 till I graduated in 99, so it's like middle school, high school, that's the 90s, you know? And then my adult life, started, and then I then in 10 years ago, I bought this house, so I can picture, it's like I have these big life moments at the beginning of each decade. So I don't know what's going to happen this year. It's 2020. Something's got to happen. Um, which, by the way, if I haven't mentioned how happy I am that we're finally in the 20s. One, it's just cool to say that we're living in the 20s. And I'm glad that we're not bringing back stuff from the 1920s. Although I think guys in the 1920s, the whole gangster look with the suits and the hats is pretty cool. I can't stand the women from the 20s, like the nasally voice and the way they dressed. Just not my thing. Um, but it's bothered me. The big thing that's bothered me is what decade have we been in? Have I talked to you about this before? I
I
think
don't think so.
no. Um, so it's like, okay, we hit the year 2000. What decade were we in? From 2000 to 2010.
Some people call it the
The
aughts, I think.
aughts, the aughts, which just sounds horrible. Sounds like you're talking about like a shotgun.
No.
That's not a decade. And then even after that, you get to 2010. You're not in the. Are you in the tens? I guess you're in the tens. My dad's like the teens. I go, yeah, but you weren't in the teens for the first 3 years of that decade, you know. So finally, we're in a decade where I can say the 20s. I call everything before the 2020 the early 2000s. I just lump those two decades together and I say the early 2000s.
That's nice and clean. I also think we could probably succinctly answer this guy's question by saying we've both lived in Florida my whole life.
There you go. Yes, yes. Um, so yeah, I mean, so I've lived here for 30 years, or 29 of my 39 years. So I'm an official Floridian. I used when I first moved here. I used to make fun of Floridians. I used to call them Flor idiots. And it wasn't that I had anything against Floridians. I just when I was a kid, I didn't want to move. I wanted to stay in New York, and so it's like anything I can find to complain about Floridians, I would. So I called them Floridiots, and um, and I made fun of the way they talked, even though I talked funny because I had a New York accent. Like I used to say instead of orange, I used to say orange, and people give me a hard time. There were a few words I pronounced like that, and I used to argue like, "Hey, listen, people lived in New York before they lived in Florida. So what we say is right, which I don't really know is true. I mean, the first explorers landed down here in Florida, right? Yeah, or explorers like Ponce de Leon or whatever his name is and stuff like that. As far as Native Americans, they at least Southern Florida they didn't live down here till we pushed them down here, right?
I don't think they
So
called it an orange though.
yeah, yeah. So, but someone asked why did my family move from New York? Um, Besides the fact that New York sucks. Um, I lived in the suburbs where I technically lived was still I think considered part of the city, even though I didn't really live in the city. I lived in the suburbs, and it was a semi nice. But I guess according to my parents, it started going downhill, especially after we moved. Crime rates went up, and it just was horrible. And just um, I personally have. I would love to go back and see my old town, which is we have Google Street View, but I also have no desire to go to New York. It's just not a state that I want to even drive through. Even though I was going to say when I was a kid, I remember going to upstate New York, which was really nice. But then recently I
Right.
found out that we weren't in upstate New York, we were actually in Connecticut, and the memories I had. So Connecticut's really nice, I guess. I just remember going to visiting some relatives that I thought was upstate New York, but it was Connecticut. And we do go to like real pumpkin patches, where they're actually growing pumpkins and they're not just put out on hay bales, at the local church, and we'd actually go and pick apples off trees and make apple pies. And those are some good memories, but as far as like New York, the city and stuff like that, I went to Chicago 8 years ago, and that was kind of like New York, but a lot nicer, a cleaner feeling. But I'm not a big city guy. I don't mind visiting a city. I don't want to live in the city. Um, but yeah.
My wife and I went to Chicago year last, not this last, but the last before January.
Hmm.
And my mom got us the trip for Christmas, and she's like, "I got such a good deal on the plane tickets. It was such a good deal." We get there, and it was like 11 degrees below. We had our Uber drivers were like, "You guys are from Florida?" We're like, "Yeah." They're like, "Why are you here?"
It's funny.
And
Oh, go ahead. Finish your stories.
it was all because my mom found like the best prices she could on all the tickets.
Um, I went to Chicago the one time to visit my buddy Austin, actually, because he lives up there. He actually, I don't know who he works for now. He's working for a bank at one point. He does SQL database stuff. Um, but So it was just before my daughter was born. Actually, just before we got pregnant with my daughter. Because my daughter's 7, so it was just before that. You're supposed to have a baby moon where you do this big last vacation before you have kids. And we ended up having two because we did one and it took us a little bit longer to get pregnant than we thought. And so we did another one. I think it was the first one. We did a 2-week vacation because we love Colorado. And we always go out to Colorado. And we decided that we were going to check out Chicago. So we went and we did a week in Colorado, and then we flew and spent a week with my buddy Austin in Chicago. And it's funny because we went when I went to Colorado. We have friends that live in Colorado who we normally stay with, but I had another friend who owned a house out there, and he offered to let me stay at his place. In Breckenridge, and Breckenridge, is out in the mountains and stuff like that. Um, and there were a couple of mornings where I got up and it was 30 degrees out, or 30 something degrees out, but sunny. And in Colorado, when it's sunny out, it's still pretty warm. And I went out on the deck in jeans, no shirt, no shoes, and sat out on the deck for a while. And it was chilly, but I was fine. We got to Chicago, and it was that cold wet. It was rainy and stuff. It was only 60 degrees, and I'm wearing a leather jacket and stuff, and I was freezing. It's just amazing how it's that the wet and wind can make such a big difference. In Colorado, you have such dry air that it could be snowing yet still kind of warm out.
Mhm. Yeah, we tried 3 times to go to the Navy Pier and just couldn't make it there because we'd start walking towards it, and the wind that would come down, because it's a big grid,
Mm-hmm.
would come down the street from Lake Michigan, and it was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It was awful. And we also saw the fire department was out in force because we were near a hospital and somebody escaped. Oh, I guess it was a mental hospital, and we went to eat somewhere nearby, and like they turned off the lights, or no, the lights were dim because it was like a nice kind of place to eat,
Mm-hmm.
and they turned on all of the lights, and the waiter came by and was like, the police are just looking for someone, it's not a big deal. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel like not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
We never figured out exactly what happened, but yeah.
Someone wrote, "I'm from South Jersey. We hate New York too." It's funny you say that because it's like I don't get. I guess New York and New Jersey have this whole they hate each other thing going on. I mean, I was unaware of that when I lived there, but I was just a kid. But you ever watch How I Met Your Mother? If you haven't,
Yeah.
it's a great TV show. But they're constantly making fun of Jersey in that show. And I don't get. I asked a friend of mine who used to live in New York, and he was a bit older. I'm like, "What's up with people from New York hating New Jersey?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's not really." He goes, "But that's where we send all our trash. Our garbage trucks bring all our garbage to Jersey." I don't know if that's true or not. um, let's see. True, all women in their 20s had major. Oh. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to talk about now. Um, I'm going to real quick show this. This is the game me and my daughter have been working on. I mentioned this yesterday. I tried to show it, but I took a little video clip of it today. I added some more touchscreen features to it. This again started as a project for my daughter just to get her playing around with code. I wrote a simple little game where I used some graphics from the Nintendo Kirby game, and I basically opened up the source code and let her play with the variables to make him move faster, jump higher, bounce more, that sort of stuff. And she started getting all excited and was like, "Oh, can we do this? Can we do that?" I'm like, "We can." And she started coming up with all these ideas, and I'm like, "Well, we'll need art for that." So she started drawing all these pictures and stuff. So I've been writing a lot of code for this, which I don't mind doing, and she's doing. I actually drew that little. His name is Fluff character in GIMP, but the other two are scans of stuff she drew, and she's actually now doing some drawings on her little Amazon tablet, which we might add into the game. But anyone who wants to check that out, these are the URLs. You can actually play it right now. And again, it's still in its early stages, but as I work on it, you'll see the changes here at filmsbychris.com/scripts. By the way, this is all lowercase. I'm just realizing the font I use is all uppercase. But it's filmsbychris.com/scripts/2020 /games/Puffy Flyer. But if you just go filmslikechris.com /scripts, you can click on the 2020 folder and the games folder and Puffy Flyer, and you can play that right now. And then the source code's over at gitlab.com /MLX1000 Puffy Flyer. Again, all lowercase. Yeah, and it should work on tablets and phones. The character will follow your finger. There's a red button to make him start to fly, so you can make him go up and down. And you can't attack the enemies now, but they can kill you, and you'll respawn after a couple of seconds. And you can make it full screen as long as you're not on an iOS device, because they are incapable of allowing browser stuff to go full screen for some reason. Let's see. I think it's about time. I got a few other things that we can talk about. We can talk about next week, though. So, but it's about 9 o'clock. I'm going to go watch The Middle. Me and my wife watched The Middle. We're going through all the seasons right now. I don't know if you've watched that all. And we're about halfway through. We just started the 5th season, and I think there's 9 seasons. But if you haven't checked it out, The Middle's a pretty funny show, especially if you have kids. And like their kids are teenagers in the show, but they still do stuff that my 4 and 7-year-old do so much that I almost fall out of my seat laughing because it's so relatable. But I thank everyone for watching. Filmsbychris.com, Chris with a K, that's my website. Check it out. And also check out NaplesDroneSolutions.com. That's Andrew's company. And probably next week, I work next Monday, but sometime next week we'll do another one of these, and maybe we'll play video games together or something at some point and stream that. I don't know.
Either Cobot or...
Yeah, if Cobot's multiplayer. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a great day. Bye.